welcome back to the channel. I'm Joe Bressler. I'm a filmmaker based in Brooklyn, New York. I want to take some time to do a couple of tests with the Sony Burano and the Sony FX3. I've used the Sony FX3 on a number of projects at this point, from the Cats commercial that I filmed with Nico to a bunch of documentary projects alongside the Sony Burano, but I've never taken the time to actually test both cameras next to each other and compare how does the image look straight out of camera, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each. I have a commercial shoot coming up where I'm going to be using the Burano and the FX3, so I want to be a little bit more knowledgeable about where are the Burano's strengths, where am I going to need to use the Burano instead of the FX3, or where can the FX3 fit into the workflow, not have any compromises with image quality. But I just wanted to see if both cameras are set to 5500 Kelvin and there's no tint adjustments, how well do they match up? Here I am sitting here in my YouTube setup and I am shooting the Burano at 8.6K RAW and the FX3 at XAVC I4K. I wanted to shoot both of these cameras at their highest resolution to give them sort of the best representation of what they're capable of. And here's the log image from both cameras. Burano, FX3, obviously they look pretty much the same. I'm just gonna show you straight out of camera with the color space transform what they look like. Here's the Burano. And here's the FX3. I think that the Burano in this case is looking better. It's showing more separation between the color in my skin and the wall. The wall looks like a different shade than my skin does. Whereas on the FX3, everything kind of just looks like not as separated and a little bit more uniform and mushy, if I had to use an adjective. I prefer how the Burano looks here. The Burano is also just tremendously sharper at 8.6K, but that's to be expected. What I would do to match these cameras up if I wanted them to be perfectly matched though, is I would go back to my log image and I would go into the color tab. I would go into the color match tool and I would grab the color chart. I'm gonna choose the color matcher that I use, which is the X-Rite Color Checker Passport Video. So the next thing that you do is you line up your color checker with the squares, and it's a fun game that takes a second, but it is so worth it. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna put in my source gamma, which is S-Log3, target gamma, which is also gonna be S-Log3 because we're gonna do the color space transform later. And then I recorded in Sony S-Gamut 3.Cine and I recorded in 5500. It's really important that you put in the values that you recorded at. So then match, boom. It looks a little bit different. I'm gonna create a node. I'll take away my color checker because I don't need it anymore. And I will do a color space transform, and the input color space is gonna be S-Gamut 3.Cine, again, because that's what I recorded. And the input gamma is gonna be Sony S-Log3 because that's what I recorded. And an output color space for both of these parameters is gonna be Rec 709. So there you go, I'll make this fit. And the colors are now corrected. The values of the highlights and the gamma and the shadows are all a little off and meant to be corrected. And so what I've done down the line here is I've already pre-corrected that and made it match with the FX3, which I did the same process on. So you do use the color match tool for both cameras on the same color chart, and you should get the exact same result, especially if you're using two cameras from the same brand that have more or less the same color science. The FX3 and the Sony Burano with a color match and a color checker matches up perfectly in post, which is great news because they are gonna get used a lot in A and B cam situations. I wanted to then put these cameras both in a trying situation. They perform pretty much the same, other than that the Burano is starting to lean really magenta, especially in the wall. If you look, the FX3 is leaning more green. The FX3 with the zebra set to 100 here, the highlights were starting to clip if I'd opened up any more. With the Burano, I had about a stop, at least more to open up before the highlights clip here. Matching them, they look exactly the same though. Now this is the point where I really started to learn about the magenta shift that I'm seeing from the Burano, and it was the most illuminating part of the test for me. The Burano just looks way more magenta here. I would rather it looks like this straight out of camera. That is not a problem. That's something you can dial in across all of your white balance presets so that every time you're shooting, no matter what the white balance is, you're always dialing out that magenta. I found myself matching the Burano colors to the FX3 colors. So here we can see the correction, the Burano, FX3. I mean, again, these differences are not earth-shattering and they are very correctable in post. I decided that I wanted to start to kind of figure out where I want my tint correction to live in the Burano, and I don't really think I've quite gotten there yet. But here it is at -0, ±0, and then here it is -2. I saw a video from Shane Hurlbut, which I'm gonna link in the description as well, where he talks about matching the Burano to the Venice 2 sensor, and he said that he does -2. I could see myself trying -10 or -20 in the white balance settings to really get the look out of camera that I'm going for. Here's the FX3. I'm noticing that the FX3 is darker at the same settings for some reason, but the color is still looking a little bit more greenish. Once we match the two up, the Burano looks a little bit better. Again, I'm seeing the thing in the Burano where there's just nicer color separation. So in the background, the window looks a little bit more blue, whereas my skin is feeling a little bit more warm and natural. There's some more depth to the image, whereas on this one, everything kind of, again, just feels a little smushier and less separated, and also, again, a little bit softer. Now, before I get to my final impressions of this test, I want to give you a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, which is FrameSet. I use FrameSet for planning every single project. I have 2 commercials next week, one I am shooting and one I am directing, and in both cases, I use FrameSet to pull reference frames. FrameSet is the best place to find still and moving images from commercials, music videos, and films for your projects to help communicate your vision to your team. Having a plan in pre-production is so important in order to have a successful and smooth shoot and get the vision that you have in your head onto the screen. So try FrameSet out today. There's a link in the description. You will not be disappointed. The image straight out of the Burano is more magenta than I'd like it to be, and I have some work to do to test where I want the minus magenta shift to live in my white balance preset. The image overall is still better than the FX3. I'm just amazed at how good the FX3 looks without any adjustment. We test cameras because you learn these things quickly that you would learn over a longer period of time using it on shoots and seeing the results. Especially because like on shoots, sometimes you don't have a hand in post-production or the grades. It's so important, and I'm getting better by doing these tests, and I'm producing better results for the people that are hiring me. And if there's anything that you guys want me to test, please leave a comment down below and I will try to incorporate it in my next test. So that's all I have on this one. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.